Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, presented by T.A. Forsberg. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
So there are many nonprofits out there delivering services to people who need it, and many host fundraisers to help keep their mission moving forward. Here to share the story of the Davies Project and their upcoming installment of Max's Race is the Executive Director, Pam Miklavcic, and Jan Nestel and Mike Mershak, who are both on the board for the Davies Project and are Max's Race committee members. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us, Chris.
So,
thanks, Chris.
Yeah, so the Davies Project, in a nutshell, who are you and what services do you provide for the community?
I'll take that question. This is Pam. We make sure that seriously ill children in our community have access to free rides to medical care. It's very important. So many families in our community do not have transportation or easy access to transportation. Yet we want to make sure that when they're seriously ill in particular, that they can get to every kind of medical care that they need. In our community, 70% of the children who rely on the specialty clinics are on Medicaid, and they traditionally miss about 60% of their outpatient appointments, and that's what we're trying to correct.
Yikes. So how did that need get uncovered? How long have you been around? How did the Davies Project start?
I became aware of a lot of this when my son was ill with cancer 23 years ago. And it was talking with the staffs in the clinic at the hospital, we'd hear again and again how many children were not making it to their appointments. And transportation was the key issue. So as I moved forward, moving past my son's illness and was starting to look for next steps in my life, I thought, you know what, there's something we can do here.
Wow. And the Davies. Who are the Davies, if I may ask?
Dr. Deli Davies was the chair of pediatrics and human development in the College of Human Medicine at Michigan State. Okay. And he just was an exemplary physician in this community, great integrity, great passion for the children of our community. And he now is in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay. But this was my way of just recognizing him for his amazing vision for our community.
Fantastic. Okay. And so the Davies Project is a mid-Michigan-based nonprofit. Is that right?
That's
You don't
correct.
have extensions in other cities or other states?
We are based in Lansing. Yep. This is where we started it. We are the first of its kind in the nation doing the work that it's doing. But what we are doing here could be applied to every community in Michigan. And that's why I'm just so passionate about it. We've created a model that works beautifully to get children the care they need in a compassionate way with drivers who really feel for them and who really relate to them. And we want to share that with other communities so that all kids are getting the care they need.
We'll talk about that model. So you talk about drivers, right? I mean, is that...
Right. So it's all volunteer drivers. And the volunteer drivers mostly come from teaching, social work, and medical backgrounds. They're not restricted to that, but that's who's drawn to our mission. Yep. And lots of retirees. And they just give of their time. They give of their vehicles. They're very seriously background checked. Yep. They get lots of training, and then they go.
Right on. So how many rides do you deliver?
We are growing.
How does that work?
We are growing. This past year, 2022, it was about 1,900 rides. We are moving way beyond that this year. In fact, we've had to start a waiting list, something we don't want to do.
No kidding.
The ride requests are going through the roof. We think we're still only meeting about 10% of the need in the community, which means there's still a lot of room for growth there, but we need drivers, volunteers to come step forward and help us out. And it's a really fun way to give back to the community.
And I can imagine that relationships are formed and, that there's a lot of probably very heartwarming stories that would come out of that kind of relationship.
There are. I drove a young girl yesterday, 13 years old, battling cancer. And I picked her up in St. John. And oh my goodness, what an amazing young woman. Just full of life and so smart and questioning and curious and big dreams for the future. And it was just to realize the impact our agency is having on children like that.
Right.
It's huge.
Well, good for you.
I think one of the most impactful moments for me was I was not on the board yet, but I went to the annual breakfast. They used to have it at the Lansing Country Club, and now it's gotten too big for that space, so we have it at the MSU Credit Union usually in the fall. But when I heard a volunteer driver speak about their experience and how it revitalized their desire to live and feeling like they had a purpose and the connections they made. So all of a sudden you realize that this benefit, which is intended to help the kids, is also helping a lot of the adults that choose to participate. I mean, it has this massive double impact, or I guess unintentional and intentional
right.
impact of helping the volunteer drivers. So you have like these two segments. You have to coordinate the patients that need to get to their appointments, but you also need to coordinate volunteer drivers with the proper training and background checks, but also when are they available? You know, when people volunteer, you have to wait to see how many days. Do you want to volunteer once a week, twice a week?
Right.
We don't put any restrictions on them. We try to keep it as loose as possible in terms of how often do you want to participate in these. And so now one of the challenges, because gaining awareness has grown, part of being here today is to add awareness. Part of having the Max's race in June is to gain awareness. So more people reach out so we can serve the community better. But then now we need more drivers. So there's a really strong push to try to attract and gain drivers.
And I'd like to add to
Absolutely.
that part that it's such an appealing thing for people who want to volunteer but don't know how much they can, so that you can do it once a year or 5 days a week. And it's very flexible for people. And that's really appealing. And I think that after people get going, they find it quite rewarding. My husband is a driver. He's been a driver for about 7 years.
Wow.
So I have the privilege of hearing him come and tell me the stories time after time after time. And he makes nice connections with some of the families. And then the families get to see a familiar face often when they get a repeat drive.
Yep.
That is just a really positive thing.
Well, I love that unintended consequence that you're talking about. I mean, in today's contentious day, there's so much mental illness and frustration and depression, and you get lost in your own thoughts, right? There's a lot of people out there who could otherwise be really productive or are very productive, but just don't have a lot of stuff to do outside of whatever they do on a day in and day out basis. And it sounds like this kind of unexpected volunteering program can really kind of fill that bucket and
Absolutely.
give you new hope and optimism and positivity in your life when it seems like all is lost.
It's really that true win-win kind of thing.
Right.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
it gives you a sense of purpose. And I
Right.
think that's really important no matter where you are. That sense of purpose
And the
is
news coming
critical.
out of D.C. this morning is talking about the epidemic of loneliness in our country
Right.
and how volunteerism is such a beautiful antidote to that.
Right.
I also want to add, we also now drive pregnant moms to visits for prenatal care,
Okay.
and also families up to the neonatal intensive care unit so they can go and see their babies who are often in that unit. And it's just stunning because I have twin granddaughters who are 6 now, but they were up in that neonatal unit.
Okay.
And I remember being up there thinking, I just popped in my car, drove up, saw them whenever I wanted to, and I looked around and I thought, how many families who don't have transportation can't get up here to see their children who they love just as much? I was really struck by that.
It's
Yeah.
a real challenge. It's a real challenge.
So while we've got everyone's attention, how would people learn more about the Davies Project?
What you need to do is go to our website, and that's thedaviesproject.org, and Davies is Davies. And there's all the information you need there, and about how to volunteer. And if you know families in need of our services, let them know too. We serve Greater Lansing, but watch out, we'll be coming to other parts of the state when we can.
I think we're available on all the social platforms too.
Got
so
it.
I think we have an intern or others involved that work with Pam really closely, and so everything's available on all the social channels as well.
Got it. Davies Project. Yeah, that's
Davies
easy
Project.
to do.
Yes.
Well, I want to talk about Max's Race, but at first I want to talk about one of our wonderful sponsors. When it comes to managing your finances and planning for your future, I suggest you contact my friends at Wagoner Financial. Whether you're just getting started, getting ready to retire, or anywhere in between, Wagoner Financial can help you make smart financial decisions. Don't navigate complex problems on your own. Wagoner has the expertise to help you feel confident that you're making the right financial choices. Contact an advisor by calling 517-853-3367 or visit their website at Wagoner-financial.com. Wagoner Financial, you won't regret it. So Max's race. First of all, so who's Max? And what is and this is an annual event. How long has it been going on? And talk about the
I believe this is the 18th year for Max's race.
Wow.
Now, the race was turned over to the Davies Project a few years ago.
Okay.
We had been the recipient of funds for a few years prior to that. But Max Matthews was a little boy from the Lansing area who passed away from complications due to meningitis. And his parents put together this race in his memory. And they've just been wonderful supporters even now of the work we do, but now they get to come to the race and enjoy it. And, we do
Is there
the
a lot of
legwork.
work that goes into this?
There's a lot of
No,
work.
okay.
I'm going to leave that to these two to describe all the efforts.
So Jan,
that
how
it
does
takes.
how does the magic happen?
Yeah, well, we do have a lot of work to do, but it's really fun work and it's really satisfying work. We have help setting it all up and getting it going, and it will be on the campus at Michigan State on June 24th at 9 o'clock. We have walk-run option, and
The race actually begins at 8 o'clock.
Oh, I'm sorry. The race begins at 8 o'clock. Oh, and then do we have the kids thing around 9 o'clock?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
good. 8 o'clock, June 24th. Yeah, and then we have a couple of events for children, and it's right at the auditorium, so we're by the Rock.
Okay.
That's our location, and it's always great to be on the campus, so that's a fun option. It does take a lot of setting up, and we could use volunteers to help us with the race as well.
Okay.
So again, all of this is available on the daviesproject.org website.
And open to sponsorship for sure.
Okay.
But the weather usually works out. It's a really fun and often kid oriented event, and I really enjoy it. It was back when I first started running. Doing 5Ks, slow 5Ks. This was one of the first events.
Yeah, me too.
We have a lot of really helpful partners and existing sponsors we could use more. So anybody that wants to help or talk to your office and your team and say, hey, let's all have a healthy Saturday in June, and we'll sponsor our office team to come out and walk or run the 5K. Bring your kids, bring your spouses or your significant others and your family. I think it's a really fun family-oriented event for the day. And
we also have really cool T-shirts and the most amazing medals this year.
Oh, yeah?
So, yeah, they're just really fabulous. So,
yeah.
And the kids especially love getting that medal,
Right.
Right. My 6-year-old ran it last year. Oh, he didn't run the 5K. He did the kids race, the 1 mile, and he had a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your son's named Dash, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So to be a runner, I mean,
the
that
1
makes a
mile
lot of
dash. That's wishful thinking on our part when we named him.
Right on. Okay. So, you talk about sponsors and volunteers and all the things that are needed, and 18 years in. I mean, do you have any stalwart? I know there's always the concern that you're going to forget someone, but are there any people you want to give a shout out to that kind of are there year in and year out?
The IBEW has been a big sponsor of ours for the last few years. They're wonderful.
Fantastic.
Michigan State University Federal Credit Union, of course. I'm trying to remember some of the other sponsors this year.
I used to have that.
Merit Laboratories always brings
That's right.
Okay.
the food and drinks.
Yeah.
Last year they did. They're going to do it again this year.
Yeah.
Last year-
Merit Labs is a phenomenal organization, and if you archive in my podcast, you'll find an interview with them on the great stuff that they're doing.
Oh, wonderful.
It's an amazing
That's
story.
great.
So
Yeah.
that's what I like
Look at
about
that. Yeah.
some of these things. When you find sponsors and give them a chance to be in the spotlight, you learn so much more about these companies you don't know much about.
Right.
So that's great.
Friedland, I believe, is
Oh,
involved.
Friedland,
Okay.
yes.
Yep.
right.
They're
That's what I was
also
gonna say.
Yeah.
steady. They've got their own Scrap Fest fundraiser and
Right. Yeah.
and do great work in the community.
And I think
too.
Joel was the winner of the 5K last year.
Not surprisingly.
I always say he's a little bit lazy because he runs for like 15 minutes less than I do when he runs those races.
He golfs similarly too. He's not maximizing. Right. Okay.
Oh, that's fun.
Well, that's fantastic. So June 24th.
June 24th.
And that's a Saturday, I would imagine.
Yes.
It is.
And that sounds like it's probably a perfect time of the year too, because you're not into the raging heat, but it's also not a chance.
Right.
Knock on wood. Better not
Right.
be a chance of snow by that point. But
Well-
and campus, I mean, everything.
And last year, Sparty joined us. We are hoping he'll be there again this year.
Right on.
We're waiting to hear, but it's a beautiful run. It's all along the river, and it's a perfect time to be outside.
And what kind of turnout do you get? I mean, do you count the number of actual participants?
This race had gotten a little bit lower in numbers due to COVID, but we're trying to bring that back up. Last year we had over 200. We'd love to have 400 this year, and then double it again. My hopes are big for this race.
Well, the good news is you can handle that, right? If you're going to throw the event, whether it's 100 or 800, it probably isn't exponentially that much more work, right?
No. So come on out, and if there's anybody out there that would like to be sponsors for this race, we have a lot more slots for that too.
Got it. And that's all on the daviesproject.org website, right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
And if we can, just since it seems like we're talking about Max's race, and I think everyone's gotten the message on that, but the driver need is fascinating to me. So for listeners who are kind of intrigued by that, but maybe a little daunted as to whether they qualify or whatever, I mean, you talk about background checks and valid driver's license.
Valid driver's license, a car that has the amount of insurance that's required by the state.
Yep.
If there were to be an accident, it would go to the driver's insurance first, but any carryover would then come to our agency.
Got it. So they are using their own cars.
They are using their own cars. We supply the car seats,
but
the booster seats.
They do not have to ever lift any children. That's always all the parent responsibility. The driver can put the seat in the car and have it secured, but then the family does all the lifting. Somebody asked me that question once. They were worried about that. So, the drivers don't do any of the lifting or anything that might be difficult for them.
Right. And you just want to break down the barriers as to,
and at first,
make it easy for these folks to come volunteer.
At first, the family gets in the car with us. They don't know who we are, and it's scary.
Right.
It's scary to get in a car with a stranger. But you go through a few rides, and that trust starts to build.
Yep.
Then you start seeing the kids peeking out the window, trying to see which driver's picking them up that day. And it becomes a very, very nice experience. We take books with every drive. We make sure that kids have books to take home and add to their own libraries, and parents love that.
We also, I was going to say, we often transport people who might not speak much English or don't speak any English. Then sometimes a translator comes along, or if the English is minimal, it's a wonderful story. People know basic things, and you work it out. And that's been a very touching thing to listen to happen. So we have a real wide variety of people, and it all works out.
We should not forget to mention the fact that we have a brick and mortar location that's right. Near Sparrow Hospital, and it's the former firehouse, and there's rooms that are dedicated for families and kids with books, and
it's on the corner of Prospect and Bingham Street, just 2 blocks south of the main entrance at Sparrow. It's wonderfully renovated building. A donor stepped in and wanted us to have our own space, and it's
fantastic.
It's just a great location, and families and drivers like being able to stop by.
Got it.
Definitely open to visitors for sure.
That's what I was just going to say.
So
stop by.
Phone call, visit, look at the website.
Yep.
No excuses not to get involved with the Davies Project, daviesproject.org, and Max's race. I mean, this is such a great, heartwarming endeavor. I mean, every nonprofit obviously tugs at certain heartstrings, but how can you not get behind this kind of project? So I really appreciate the work that you're doing in our community. It's been fantastic having the three of you on here. Is there anything that we haven't shared that you wanted to talk about? I just want to
say that Michelle O'Keefe is very critical in helping make this event happen.
Michelle O'Kelly.
O'Kelly, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I messed up her name. But she is, she has lots of experience as a race director and used to work with playmakers very closely. And she helps with the Crim race out in Flint. She helps with the Lansing half marathon, the Capital City half that's sponsored. That's with Impression 5. So she's involved with the Max's race. She's also a board member for the Davies Project, and she's amazing. So a lot of the credit for organizing the race, from the T-shirts to the medals to the route to the music at the beginning of the race, she deserves a shout out.
Yeah,
and a lot of credit.
I think you could say we've all done a lot of races in our life over the years, and this one goes as smoothly as anything. And that's a pretty big thing to say. Back to your question early on.
Right.
Yeah. So
excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. We've been speaking with the executive director, Pam Miklavcic, And we've got 2 board members from the Davies Project as well. We got Jan Nestel and Mikhail Mershak joining us here today talking about Max's Race and the Davies Project, daviesproject.org. And I do want to give one final shout out to our presenting sponsor, TA Forsberg Real Estate Company at lansingrealestate.com, and Wagoner Financial at wagonerfinancial.com. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thank you, Chris.
for having us.
It's been wonderful.
Thanks, Chris.